Hello, dear listener. Welcome to the Future Seeds podcast. I'm your host, Cyprian, and in this show, I explore groundbreaking solutions to our world's unique problems by connecting seemingly unrelated fields such as technology, ecology, community, and spirituality. In this episode, I interview Nicole Gibson. After overcoming mental health challenges as a young person, and particularly anorexia, at the age of 18, she established the Rogan Root Foundation to reverse the stigmatization of mental health, body image, and self-esteem issues in Australia's young people. She was the youngest ever commissioner for the National Mental Health Commission in Australia and has taken on many challenges, notably a national tour involving 1,000 workshops in 300 communities. Her work has earned her the Pride of Australia Inspiration Medal, a finalist nomination for Young Australian of the Year, and recognition as one of Australia's top 100 most influential women. Nicole is a multi-award winning social entrepreneur. However, she prefers to be seen as a messenger of love. She is a fierce believer in love and human potential, and recently released her first book, Love Out Loud, a personal account and 10 years of content coming together to teach people self-love and self-awareness. Good morning, Nicole.
Good morning.
Super happy to interview you. So I went onto your website and it says you're a multi-award winning social entrepreneur in Australia, but you prefer to see yourself as an unstoppable messenger of love and human potential. And you want people to join you on a mission to gain collective participation in conversations that offer new possibility and new vision. There's so much to unpack just in that statement, but I'd like to start with the messenger of love. Do you think this is something that is new or not, spreading the message of love?
No, I think it's the most ancient message in the world. And what I feel in my teachings is that I don't really teach people anything. I just help them connect to what has always been there and always will be there. And all I hope for people and trust for people is that they will awaken to what their nature actually is, what's always been there inside of them. And there have been many teachers and prophets and leaders who have all pointed and alluded and spoken to that same truth.
Why is this still a message? Why are we still struggling with this when so many people have spread that message?
It's a really, really great question. I feel like there's many ways to answer this question. And the first thing I'll say to this is, evolution is something that is always happening, and we can never be separate from. And over the years and through generations, as we've evolved, we've been able to have the privilege and the capacity to start to see beyond, I guess, what our ancestors were consumed by, which was things like survival, the things they had to do to get through each day. Once upon a time, when we were living in tribes, our greatest concern day to day was how are we going to hunt animals, how are we going to eat, how are we going to have shelter. And when we were preoccupied in these thoughts and this reality, it's very difficult to start to think altruistically. It's quite difficult to think existentially and think about, answer questions like, who am I? And as we've evolved through various civilizations, these questions started to become more prevalent. The Greeks started to ask that question through philosophy: who am I? Where did I come from? Mystics started to ask these questions as well, look to the sky and say, what is the truth of our existence? And when you think about it, over this period, it actually hasn't really been that long. Like, we're talking less 1,000 years. And in the infinite spectrum of existence, we're still so young in so many ways. But I do feel like right now on the planet and in our evolution as a humanity, we, for the first time, have an ability to truly awaken to what it is that I feel and know to be our truth, because this is the first time on the planet we have an ability to communicate globally. We have enough resources, enough intelligence, enough technology to actually start to create this heaven on earth, which really resides in all of our hearts. And never before, through any of these civilizations, any of these great leaders who have asked these questions, think about prophets, say, Jesus in Christianity, he walked the planet, Christians believed, talking about the message of love. There were no planes, there was no social media, there was no capacity to spread that message in in a really, profoundly scalable way. And this has been the truth for a lot of leaders. Even some of our most recent leaders, like Nelson Mandela, he wasn't growing up in the era that you and I existing in. And we really do have the privilege of standing on the shoulders of those giants. Like, these are teachings and philosophies that I often will refer back to as a means to learn and have a higher starting point and a greater vantage point in my own teachings.
Right. So the comfort we have built for ourselves, the satisfaction of our basic needs, and our new technologies create a very different scape. Are you familiar with the work of Maslow and the hierarchy of needs?
Yeah, I was actually going to refer to Maslow before. Like, this is a perfect example. And I actually refer to Maslow a lot in my retreats and seminars, sort of pointing out some of the, I guess people have these questions a lot, which is, if this message is so ancient and it's so true, why are we not all just loving each other? Why have we not yet awakened? If it was that simple to love, why are we not just doing it? And when you look at Maslow's frame, one of the massive discrepancies that I see, and for those of you that don't know Maslow, he talks about a hierarchy of needs. At the bottom of the pyramid, there's our physiological needs, so things like food, shelter, water, sex, so on. And then above that is a sense of safety and belonging. And above that is a sense of self-esteem. And above that is purpose. And then at the highest point of the pyramid, there's self-actualization.
Eventually transcendence above
and then
that.
Transcendence, yes. Let's just get to actualization first, and then we can but when you look at this hierarchy, and I agree with how Maslow frames this in a lot of ways through my own workings with people, I think we often focus in development spaces on these top two aspects of the pyramid. So our sense of purpose, like a lot of leaders, a lot of entrepreneurs talk about purpose and finding purpose and actualizing yourself or becoming enlightened in spiritual spaces. And what maybe we look over, and this is really where I feel Love Out Loud is tackling this challenge that we're experiencing as humanity, is we don't stop to recognize actually 80% of the Western world are experiencing loneliness. So as much as we have the capacity for the first time, I think ever, to truly awaken together, because we can actually communicate and connect and unify as a species, day to day, the way that we're showing up in our lives is not actually creating a sense of safety and belonging. And we need to graduate this level before we start to have the space and the ability to reach those higher states of consciousness.
I had this whole list of questions, but I'm just going to throw it away because this is too exciting. What do you think, how would you explain the fact that 80% of the planet feels lonely?
Of the Western, I should specify and say the Western world, that the statistic from purely our world. I mean, the frame that I write about in Love Out Loud and the basis of the philosophy really tries to simplify this back. And just for the listeners that don't know my background, I wrote this book and this philosophy and created this movement after working with 500,000 people across many different countries over almost 10 years. And just noticing through all of the differences in the people that I was meeting, there was actually a sameness. And that was something that really inspired me very deeply, that despite the differences in our story, in our racial background, in what country we were born into, our financial situation, our sexuality, our gender, there was similar needs. We all wanted to be seen and heard. We all wanted to feel connected. We all wanted to belong. And that became the basis of my curiosity. And the curiosity that I have around these questions is really what has driven me to such a massive vision, because I can see the need. I've followed that curiosity deep down the rabbit hole. And one of the questions I asked and became obsessed with is, if this is something we all know that we need on some deep level, why are we not offering it? Why are we not experiencing it? And the thing that I saw again and again was fear. We're actually afraid. So why are we afraid? Why are we afraid to be vulnerable? Why are we afraid to lean in and compliment another person? Why are we afraid to be loved? Why do we spend most of our days wanting to be seen, but then as soon as we are seen, we want to run the fuck away because it's too scary? Why do these discrepancies, why are they present in our behaviors day to day? And I mean, there's so many elements to this question, but to simplify it, there are a few major reasons, and one of them is judgment. So the fear manifesting itself as judgment that we have towards ourselves. So whether that's comparisonitis, constantly comparing yourself to other people's success, constantly not thinking that you're good enough, not thinking that you have enough, not thinking you know enough yet before you actually start to like expand yourself. And I think only when you start to expand yourself and open yourself can you really start to take those risks, lean into relationships, talk to strangers, connect to other people, see the sameness, because those judgments, whether that's self-judgment or judgment for another, is always going to create a separation, and it's going to feed any insecurities. And this was very much the background I came from, battling with anorexia for many years. I was so in myself, and I write about this in the book. I say mental health challenges and this epidemic of loneliness is driven by self-orientation. So many of us are self-obsessed, and it's not because we're selfish. It's because we have never learned how to actually get out of our own way and how to lean in. And we're afraid to do that because it's unfamiliar, which, by the way, all fear comes back to. It's fear of what's not familiar to us. So when we grow up, and we're being taught in this individualistic society, it's all about you. You have to be the best. You have to be you have to win at the expense of other people losing.
And not just that. There's a great narrative of, be unique, be special.
Yes, exactly. Be significant. And even some of the leaders that I really admire, they will still spruik this message of you have to be extraordinary. And a lot of the spiritual teachings that I connect most deeply with that have come from my own personal experiences in sitting with people, that people who truly feel the most connected, who truly feel the most love inside of them, are the people that are really able to come to terms with their ordinariness, that
and see the sameness, as you were saying.
Yeah, the sameness, and how you don't have to try to be special. Your very existence is a miracle, and this is a shift that when you start to access this understanding, like I am a miracle. I don't have to do anything, and it's not because of what I've achieved. It's not because of what I do. It's not because of what it says on my resume or the amount of money I have on my bank account. It's because against all odds, I exist, and that is incredible. Like 99% of what I am made of is the universe. And when you awaken to that, there's this shift that happens from I have to do or I have to be this to I'm so grateful for this opportunity to live. And when you embrace that, every part of you moves from fear, this contraction of there's not enough time, there's not enough resources, there's not enough love, to wow, I am so blessed. Like life is a miracle, and I get to be here now, and I get to have all of these experiences, and I get to see, and I get to taste, and I get to touch. Alan Watts says it, like we want to look, people are obsessed with looking for the virtues in life. What we don't realize is like our very existence is a virtue. Seeing is a virtue, tasting is a virtue, being able to make love is a virtue, being able to feel is a virtue. And when you really connect to the the simplicity but the profoundly complex at the same time existence that we get to live in, and how perfectly like insanely incomprehendibly perfect this existence truly is, then you really start to be able to, I think, access that love inside of you, because it's about accepting what it is you are rather than trying to become more and more and more.
And so you've worked in the mental health, I don't like to call it industry, but field, in Australia a lot. You've worked with people that were quite affected, that had conditions that were medically treated. What's the effect that you've seen of bringing more love on people who had medically treated conditions on the long term, I mean?
It's a great question. And I want to preface this and say at no point in any of what I teach or do or create do I say, do I dismiss medical models. But what I can offer is what I have seen and what I have heard fed back to me from working with some of these people, including myself, who have had clinically diagnosed mental illness. And I've had people come up to me and share things like I've been in therapy for decades, and what I've experienced in your seminar has been more powerful than all of those therapy sessions combined. So it's quite powerful statements. And on many, many occasions, people have written to me or come up to me with huge amounts of gratitude, just saying how deeply the message has touched them and how it's been able to put words to things that they've always felt but never been able to articulate, that for the first time in their life that they've really felt seen and acknowledged. And they're the differences. Is the way that I work with people is all about, first, there are some principles that I need to really believe in order to do the work that I do. And the first is that we are naturally designed to heal, and healing is a natural process that will occur as long as you give it the space. So that's quite a contradictory belief or approach to a lot of medical spaces, because in medicine you're taught to treat symptoms, you're taught to react to the symptom. And what my work's suggesting is, well, actually, if you create space, then healing is natural. You don't actually need to interfere. In fact, what I noticed in the spaces I was creating is the less that I interfered, the less that I said, the less that I did, the more powerful the transformation. And what I started to notice on a spiritual level is actually, yes, there's something very profound about the undoing. And on a more practical level, the deeper I got into the work, the more I studied how the brain and the nervous system actually respond to environments where people feel acknowledged, seen, heard, loved, like they belong, is the nervous system all of a sudden actually starts to calm down. And when the nervous system's calm, then healing in a very quantum level starts to become possible, because when your body's under stress, when your mind's under stress, it is extremely difficult to access your parasympathetic nervous system. It's very difficult to access the part of you which is able to heal. You are able to heal yourself. There's still on the planet amazing teachers like Joe Dispenza, like Louise Hay, like Bruce Lipton, like these incredible teachers have shown this time and time again. We have the power to heal ourselves. What I have noticed through my work is sometimes there are people that consciously believe they can heal themselves. Like they tell themselves, they say the mantras, I can heal myself, I will get better. But because they haven't actually spent enough time exploring that state of beingness, they haven't necessarily accessed their subconscious. And when your subconscious mind is in conflict with your conscious mind might be saying something like, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. and go for a run. And your conscious mind's only 10% of your mind, if that. So there's 90% of your mind that might be because of past traumas, past experiences, trapped emotions, that are actually in conflict with that belief that you're trying to have congruence with. So what do you think is going to happen when you show up in the world? You're saying, I want this, but you're drawing in experiences, because life is a mirror of us, based on whatever's going on in your subconscious. So in the spaces that I was creating, there was enough gentleness, there was enough safety, there was enough space for people to start to actually dig deeper than what they were telling themselves. Things they didn't even realize were in their subconscious started to come into the space. That might have been in reacting, getting triggered by someone else in the group. It might have been a memory that started to pop into their mind that they didn't even realize that it happened to them. It might be, somatic releases, because for the first time in their life, they felt safe enough to actually have that come up. And subconscious information has an opportunity to start to process through the conscious mind. And I know from my own medical experiences, I never had space to do that. I was constantly being told, you're killing yourself. These are all of the risks. This is the fear. We need to treat the symptoms. And because I was in a fear state, my defenses were getting stronger and stronger. So I was actually contracted. And in a contracted state, we can't heal. We need to be receptive. We need to be open. We need to be in a state where more awareness can start to be shown to us.
So you create that space of safety and silence. It makes me think of how it happens in Eastern countries where they practice silence so much, and a lot of people who feel uncomfortable in the Western world are drawn to those silent spaces in the Eastern world. On your homepage, the first thing you can see on the website is strategies and philosophy that allow love to improve your life. Could you share some of those with us?
Yeah, and they're extremely simple. So if you're after some complex strategies, you've come to the wrong place. So one of the greatest discoveries through doing this work as well has been understanding that human beings are in a constant cycle of change. And some of the strategies that I've noticed people lacking in our culture is the ability to deal with change in a loving way. So if you're listening to this, maybe think back to your last breakup, or a time where you lost your job, or someone close to you passed away, or a friend left your life, whatever. Often when we think about change, we have some sort of traumatic association. This is what I've noticed. And this has begun mostly because our initial change phases in life were not properly facilitated. We're not held in a really safe way. So in other cultures, they had proper initiation. Rite of passage was a part of their culture, where elders would understand that it was through their wisdom and their life experience that they had a responsibility to hold the young boy that was stepping into his manhood, or the young girl that was stepping into her womanhood, through that journey in a very safe way without actually interfering. So using the boy as an example, if his rite of passage was to go and hunt a tiger, the elders weren't there hunting the tiger for him. What the elders did was prepare him with the confidence, with the skill, with the resilience, with the self-belief. And then when it was time, he had to do that by himself. And when he came back to the community after he had successfully done that, the elders would celebrate him. They would build him up. They would welcome him as a man. They would acknowledge, the great triumph that had just occurred. When you think about our examples of this, we really fall short. Most young people are initiating themselves. Schoolies, yeah, that's how they're initiating themselves, like peer pressures and drinking and drugs and porn, and these are our modern day versions of initiation. And not to judge it, but definitely it's no wonder that when I was working with people who were of an older generation, I would go from working with teenagers, and they would be going through this, like, partying or taking drugs or whatever it was, as a means to become an adult, as a means to have an identity that was beyond the child, which we need to do. And then I was working with a 50-year-old man who was dealing with his problems by having an affair or going to the pub every night and drinking his sorrows away. What I saw was actually the exact same behavior transcribed, the same way of dealing with change, but with absolutely no awareness. So because I became very acutely aware of this, as well as this understanding that we all just want to be seen and heard and loved, and actually they go hand in hand. The reason we're doing a lot of these things is because we're not feeling seen and heard. So it's playing out in these shadow ways. I want to be acknowledged by my peers. I want to, if to be seen by my mates, it's going to take drinking 20 beers, and I'll do that, because the need to be seen and heard overrides the stupidity of the decision. Just like in Maslow's hierarchy, safety and belonging, until we address this, we can't reach these higher levels of awareness or consciousness. So what I started to see my work as was an initiation space, a space where people could come in and love out loud the book and the course online and everything that we've created as the strategy to help you actualize that self-love inside of you has been designed and curated as a rite of passage process. So you're coming into a space, you're leaving an identity behind as soon as you walk in the door, as soon as you open the book. And then you're going through a phase where, in my work, I call it liminality. This is a commonly used word, liminal space, where you're not who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. So in this state, you're sort of identityless. Anything could happen. And it's very important to infuse that space with love and with compassion and with genuine intent. Because if you're being held in that space and the facilitator isn't holding you with that safety and that pure intention, then you're actually being molded and manipulated through their lens because you're so vulnerable and open. What I endeavor and I'm very committed to, and integrity is a really big thing for me in my work, is making sure that all of my biases, all of my opinions of who I think you should be are completely off the table. And creating a space that is totally open, which is what I believe love to be, is pure allowance. Love is completely free. It's void of all opinion. It's non-judgmental. And in that space, all of a sudden you will awaken to infinite possibilities, because there's no outside force that's manipulating you or forcing you or pressuring you to be anything, including the identity that you were even minutes ago. And how do we actually bring ourselves into that natural state, which is there are so many possibilities that we could be. You could make any decision right now that would change the total trajectory of your life. So why are you not? If you're unhappy, if you're unfulfilled, why are you not choosing to do something different? Literally because people are not even aware that they're thinking within a box. They're not even conscious of the fact that they're thinking in the box. So it's sort of like there's these elephants in Thailand, most of you probably heard this, who get trained. And the way that they're conditioned is they get tied to a pole. And then over a period of time, when they've tried to walk away and they've realized they can't, actually they stop getting tied to the pole, but the trainers leave the rope on them and they stop even trying to walk away, even though they're free, because they're so conditioned that it's called learned helplessness. And what I see in society is a lot of learned helplessness. People have been trained to think inside a box. Our education system encourages us to think outside the box.
This great writer, Alessandro Jodorowsky, wrote this beautiful sentence: birds who are born in cages think flying is an illness.
Yeah.
We haven't...
Well, that is society. Let's just go into that for a second. If you actually look up, and I've written this in, I think it's chapter 6 on creativity in Love Out Loud. When you look at the definition of insanity in the dictionary, it's defined as someone that acts in an unpredictable fashion.
Oh, really?
That is the definition of insanity. So someone who's unpredictable. So unless you're showing up and you're predictable and you're the same, then you're considered insane.
That's weird.
Which is very interesting. It's not very conducive for people being expressive and trying to discover, different aspects of who they are.
For sure. We haven't actually explained what Love Out Loud is yet. So Nicole, what is Love Out Loud? What is that movement that you're building, and what's the vision?
Yeah, it's a great question. Glad we could get there. Hopefully, in what you've listened to so far, listeners, you've had some sense of what it is that's being created. So after working in mental health for many years, leading a nonprofit, working as a commissioner in the federal government, I started to realize these things, which I've talked about already. And I realized that mental health was a symptom. We were looking at mental health as the problem, but actually mental health was the symptom. And that became very clear to me. And it was a symptom of a culture that was not supporting us in a natural way, in the way that we're truly meant to live as human beings. And that was undeniable based on what I had seen to that point. And there was a calling in me, a very deep calling in me as well. I was going through a deep period of heartbreak. Someone I loved very much broke my heart pretty brutally, and I was cracked open. And I was also, as anyone that's experienced heartbreak or huge amounts of pain, you're very present when you're heartbroken. You can't not be present. You can't run away from what's there. And I look back in hindsight and I realized that's exactly how it needed to be, because I wouldn't have gone on to create more if that hadn't happened. But in this presence and this pain, I really started to ask myself the questions I was avoiding, which is the work that I'm doing right now, because I was very successful in my field, especially for someone so young, is what I'm doing now really the ultimate? Is it my life's purpose? Is it what is the deepest message inside of me? And what I started to realize is, no, what I discovered through the work was my real message, was the truest part of who I am. And that was the message of love. And it seems like a normal thing to say I do now. Like, yeah, I'm a messenger of love. I travel the world and I teach love. That seems normal. But I remember a few years ago when I started to realize that that's what my soul really wanted me to do, and that's where my heart wanted me to go. That seemed like a very intangible, quite insane,
challenging,
thing to be pursuing. And yeah, like where do you even begin? Okay, you want to be a teacher of love. Like, what does that even mean? Like, love is such an elusive thing. How do I teach this? How do I break this down? How do I make it tangible? And so I wasn't making many great decisions for myself because I was so heartbroken. The first very powerful decision I made for myself was to book a trip. And I ended up traveling for a long period of time, but one of the first places I went was Spain, and I was attending a conference there. And I was sitting on the beach, and it was one of the first times I'd really let myself be fully present with the pain that I was truly experiencing. Like, I had been in the pain, but I wasn't surrendering to the pain. I was still trying to run away from it. I was fighting it. And so I allowed myself to go into that grief, and I was sitting on the beach. It was about 4:30 a.m. my time. It felt horrible. It felt like I was dying. But in that grief, as I was purging that into the sand, I asked the question to higher power, use me for your highest good. Show me why I'm going through this. Show me the higher reason. And literally in that moment, I had a message come through on my phone from someone in Australia who I'd never met before. And she said, I've been following your journey for many years, and I'm a book coach, and I really think you should write a book.
Boom.
And head to toe, like, the resonance in my body was not something that I could have denied. Like, it was very, very clear that's exactly, like, God literally answered my call in that moment. I literally answered my call. And as soon as that happened, Love Out Loud started to write me. It wasn't a matter of deciding. It didn't feel like that. It felt like I had been struck by lightning, and there was something in me that just needed to come through me. And so that's how I started to write the book. 6 months later, I finished the book. What was very interesting about the writing process was, and I say this with the deepest reverence and the deepest gratitude to the power of love that supported me through this journey, that in every chapter that I wrote, and the 9 chapters, like, literally straight away were clear to me. I saw them. I saw the process. I saw how I was going to write it as an initiation, and the 3 chapters and the 3 parts, all of that just came. It was really amazing. But as I wrote each chapter, my life literally became a 360-degree mirror of what I was writing. So when I wrote on belief, like, the integrity behind my beliefs was getting challenged. Everyone wanted to talk to me about beliefs. When I wrote honesty, which is chapter 2, everything in me that I hadn't been honest with in myself and with others started to come to the surface. And what was so fascinating about this was, until I had reached a point of complete integrity, until I had really addressed this in myself, I got writer's block. Like, I couldn't keep writing. So the book and what was coming through me was propelling me into my own growth. So by the end, and when I finished the last sentence of Love Out Loud, like, I was actually sitting right here, and I finished and I wrote the full stop, and I actually jumped up in this, like, it was one of the most ecstatic feelings, like better than a standing ovation, better than sex. Like, it was the most amazing feeling in the world. Like, something really special had just come to completion, and all of the pain that I was in was lifted. And this is why I believe in it so much, because Love Out Loud healed me. It healed my heart. It brought me into a true sense of awakening to the truth of our existence. And it's a frame that has consistently taught me, it doesn't matter how much I think I know this philosophy of love and compassion, I'm constantly a student, even though I wrote it, which is so interesting. And it always keeps throwing new things at me and showing me new challenges, which is, part of what I think keeps me so inspired and passionate.
And tell us a bit about this incredible 4% goal you have.
Yeah, so when I wrote the book, it very much had its own life force. I didn't plan, by the way, when I was writing the book, for it to become a movement. That was not my conscious intention. But when I finished the book, I was then speaking at a conference in Estonia, in Tallinn, and I won't tell the full story because it's long, but through a series of crazy synchronicities, there was someone who I had met on a flight in Australia 5 years prior, who was in the audience, who was, at the time when I met him, was working in corporate, very successful CEO in Australia. Like, Estonia is such a random place to be, but that's how it went down. It was just written in the stars, quite literally. Like, if I was to tell people the ins and outs and the synchronicities, most people probably wouldn't believe me. And he sat me down and basically said, what do you really want underneath all of this? I want to back you. I want to invest in what you're doing. And what's the truth of what you want? And sitting with this question, I guess, being given a space of total permission, like, if anything was possible, what would this look like? The answer for me was, I want everyone in the world to realize this. I want our baseline as humanity to shift from fear to love. And one idea that had always very much inspired me was the idea of critical mass. And this is a concept that when you enroll enough people into a school of thought, into an awareness of something, the rest of humanity shift. And most physicians believe that amount is 4%. So that became the vision. And the reason we chose the year 2020, so the vision itself is to facilitate the world's largest love-based movement by engaging 4% of the global population.
I'm in.
And yeah, great, thank you. You can't not be in. That's a great thing. Even if you don't think you're in consciously, you're still in it. When you hit that 4%, the rest of humanity then come with us. So re-baselines. It becomes an unstoppable momentum. But the reason we chose 2020, which is where, if that vision wasn't enough for people to be like, you're crazy to think you can do this, to do it in such a short amount of time was sort of the icing on the cake. But there was a real reason. There was a lot of intentionality behind choosing the end of this year to achieve that vision. And that was one, because after working for so long in mental health, I would listen to so many experts, and their predictions would always be suicide and mental illness will be the leading epidemic in recorded human history by the end of 2020. And when it was like 2014, 15, 16, I used to listen to this and think, why are you painting this vision for our future? Like, you're in a position of influence, you're in a position of power, you're in a position to paint a different story for us. And that's all the future's based on, is buying into a concept and then being so inspired by that vision, by that concept, that your behavior starts to match. You have to become the person required to actualize that future. You have to embody that through your action. And when leaders are saying things like this, it's just perpetuating the same behavior. People are showing up in that way to actualize that future that hasn't even happened yet. And that never made sense to me. So it was our way of creating a counter narrative. Like, who do you need to become right now for us to successfully facilitate the world's largest love-based movement by the end of this year? And it's actually not unreasonable when you really bring it back to everything, to its core, to its root. All it takes is enough people making the same choice in the same moment. That's it. Enough people, 4% of the population, making the same choice in the same moment. And if we can successfully facilitate this, we will literally permanently shift the trajectory of humanity.
Wow. Yeah, unity. Everyone doing the same thing at the same time.
Yeah. And it might not even be the same thing, but the same intention.
Same intention, yeah. And you offer courses through Love Out Loud.
Yeah, there's many ways to get involved. And I always encourage people to come and experience the work. Obviously, reading the book is amazing, and doing the online course is also amazing. But there's nothing like actually coming and experiencing it. So there's 3 ways to do that. There's our retreat, which is an incredible, extremely immersive experience where we go very, very deep into your fears and your limitations and liberate you from them, help you meet the truth of your existence. And our facilitator training, which I'm very passionate about for people who believe in this vision and who want to actually be leaders and pioneers and ambassadors of this vision. So people come and train in this specific style of facilitation. Some of them become actual Love Out Loud facilitators, as in build Love Out Loud communities around the world. Others have existing communities and they just want to bring the philosophy that is Love Out Loud into how they run their community. Organizational managers, similar thing. Business owners, similar thing. Artists who come in and want to align their music and their art to the movement. So it's quite diverse. And it's obviously an incredible way for us to come together and scale the movement in a really big way. So I'm very passionate about that training. We have training dates open for that all around the world. So please go and check that out. And then we have a Master Heart, which is a heart-centered mastermind, if you couldn't tell by the name. And our next one is
so good.
Our next one is in Bali, and just like a mastermind, it's a similar demographic, but the main difference is it's not just about the cognitive strategies. It's actually about creating a space. And just on a side note, I created this because I've been a part of many entrepreneurial communities and masterminds and just couldn't find a community like the one that we're curating with Master Heart, which is about coming together and really doing the real work. Because for any leader that has been in the journey long enough, you'll soon know that you can have all of the best strategies in the world, but until you're really willing to look at yourself and where you're coming from and what your intention is, that strategy is not going to.
So this is the most beautiful segue I could have imagined, because my next question was about business, Nicole. How did you put together the world of business and your philosophy about love? How did you bring love into business?
It's a great question. One thing I often say is love and compassion is a strategy in business. And I just want to say that one more time. Love and compassion is a strategy in business. And so often, even in your question, we see these things as different, as separate. There's business and then there's feeling nice and being compassionate, being loving. Well, what if we actually brought them together, and how would the world look if we started to lead with love and compassion? What would you look like as a leader? How would you act as a leader? How would you interact with people? How would you build the systems in your business? How would your customer engagement be if you put love at the center of every single thing you were doing? Of course, things start to get redesigned. And it's not that there's no place for commercial elements. Like Love Out Loud is a commercial organization, but its sole focus is a social outcome and is social impact. It doesn't have to exist separately. There's a power in bringing those things together, because commercial businesses, I ran a nonprofit for many years, and one of the biggest limitations was it was very difficult to sustain financially. We were constantly there was a reliance on external financial sources, and I'm passionate about entrepreneurs building something that's self-generating, because at the end of the day, there's nothing more amazing than building something that becomes an employer to other people, that starts to transform the lives of your team and your team's family, and becomes self-generating and actually becomes a powerful engine, in our case, to bring more love into the world. But the one thing I will never compromise on, and the one thing I make very clear and that's most important to me in my leadership, is every single person that has involvement with Love Out Loud understands our organizational values, understands that we're working towards this unified vision. And what I want to do isn't to micromanage them, it's to actually inspire them into their own autonomy of decision making. And it's my job to bring that clarity. Every choice you make, how would you look as your own leader aligning to these values and this vision? How would that look for you? And that's my obsession in leadership, watching people step into that in their own right, in their own way, and do things in a probably completely different way to the way I would have done things, but the synergy and the cohesion comes from the shared value and the shared vision.
Love it. Love it. Let's come back a second to one thing you said earlier. We very briefly talked about purpose. Do you see purpose in work, in business, as related to love? I think I've read studies that show that there's a link between people having a meaning, a purpose, especially in their work, and their physical and mental health.
Yeah, 100%. It's like when you, again, like there's so many ways to talk about purpose. I think one of the most inspiring ideas for me when it comes to purpose and motivation and bringing purpose into work and improving teams' mental health, improving your mental health, is when you have a sense of purpose as there's something bigger than you, that you're constantly surrendering yourself into. And one of the quotes I love so much is most people's problems are that their problems aren't big enough. So when you're walking around day to day, and you're fixated on small problems like, is this guy going to text me back? What am I going to have for lunch? Is the bus going to be late? Like, this is most people's realities. So therefore, because these are the problems that they're fixated on, and these are the questions that they're asking, life is only going to give you a quality of life that is directly related to those sorts of problems. So how can we upgrade our problems? How can we literally get better problems? Because there's no human in the world that doesn't have problems. But there are, I think, the difference between a high performer and someone who's really able to actualize their dreams is they become obsessed with a purpose which creates different challenges and different problems at a higher level. So it's a challenge in my reality to figure out how we're going to impact 350 million people. There's so much purpose that comes with that, though. So in answering that question, of course, challenges are going to come into my space, but I stop seeing them as something that's trying to hinder me, and I start seeing them as the universe actually supporting me to become fitter, more equipped, more skilled, to be able to, more resilient, to be able to actualize that vision. And that's the power of purpose, is everything starts to have a greater perspective and more meaning. Challenges become meaningful, not just like, I'm a victim of life is happening to me. Wow, I'm so loved that I'm being challenged in these ways because the universe wants me to have all of the things that I'm asking it for. And I need to meet it halfway through taking the action.
In your case, you were on that path, and then you had that moment on that beach where you felt the calling. The calling came to you. And then you had an NGO, and then you accepted to transform that into even a business. So there's several elements there. I've been actually reading and watching every resource I ever could on purpose, mission, vocation, profession, and meaning in the last few months. Everything I could find. And I found a lot of actual literature that says start with the passion. And I was like, I thought about it so much. Maybe that's not where you start. Maybe, especially now in 2020, maybe you start with what the world needs.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Maybe you start with the mission, and then you craft something around it where your talent and skills make sense.
Yeah, your passion should be the credibility that qualifies you, to serve that greater mission. That's how I see it. So it's like I can say I'm leading. I love movement. We're getting to a point of critical mass. But if I wasn't passionate about love, I wouldn't be qualified to lead that movement. So yeah, I see it the other way around as well.
The bigger problem that you face, and then you build something around it.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like, you can't expect people to really care about your passions. Like, it's beautiful and it's amazing, but if you want to really get buy-in, give people a vision that they can own. Like, I love when people say, your vision is my vision and I've made it mine. It's not mine because it's yours. It's mine because I have a personal relationship to that vision, and I have a why that drives me towards wanting to achieve that vision alongside you. And that to me is like the most rewarding thing about leadership, is when I start hearing that language, like it's us, we, our, and other people in the community say it's mine. And there's that ownership. And I don't think that would happen if it was all about my passions.
Yeah, I see. That's how you unite people together.
Yeah.
So I think this is my last question now to you. We spoke about your movement, and we spoke about love, and we spoke about purpose. If you were to give an idea of how we could see our collective purpose, our purpose as a species, our purpose as humanity, what would you say?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think how I see things and the way that I'm serving the world is what I see for humanity, and it's for all of us to realize that truth, and how would that look? Well, I think about a lot of things for humanity. I think about how strangers would interact walking down the street. I think about how nations would resolve conflict differently. I think about how an employer would acknowledge their staff. I think about how a father would hug his son, these small changes, which may seem small in the moment, but when you think about this in a macro way, like how vastly that would impact our quality of life and our potential as human beings. And this to me is why it's important that we get to a place of love and compassion and receptivity to one another, because they're the experiences that will start to manifest as a result of that awareness. When we stop believing we need to protect ourselves all the time or watch our back or everyone's out to get us or in competition with people, when we can let all of that go and be loved, then infinite possibility. Yeah. What do we do? Exactly. Like the possibility just expands so far beyond. When you stop needing to survive day to day, there's so much more space to create.
I got to the end of my list of questions, and this was a beautiful interview. I'd just like to give you 30 seconds, a minute, if you actually want to send a message to the listeners right now, something that really touches you, that reaches you, that you'd like to say to the listeners right now.
Cool. I always struggle with this. Should definitely be something on love. I think the first line of Love Out Loud is, love is not finding the perfection, it's the unconditional permission to explore the imperfection. And that message is really important to me, because it's not about creating a perfect world. And every time I talk about this, I actually get emotional. I feel emotional right now. It's not about creating the perfect world. It's about creating more space to allow our flaws and to allow our imperfections, and to start to uninvest in these ideals of what beauty and success look like, and start to realize that it's different for all of us, and it's going to manifest differently for all of us. And that's exactly why it's amazing. And I really hope that all of you listening find that in your own way and can be that for others.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you.
This was Nicole Gibson, everyone. Hop onto your computer, type www.love-outloud.com and check it out. Maybe try out the free first module of the online course. The Future Seeds podcast is a project that is supported by its community of listeners. If you like the show and what it stands for, I invite you to head to www.futureseeds.news, where you can support the show for just $2 a month, be part of the Future Seeds community, connect with its amazing members and speakers, and enable this podcast to thrive. I thank you for your time and hope you enjoy the show and its exploration of alternative solutions to the world's greatest challenges.